Good afternoon to everyone. We will be starting the briefing shortly. In the meantime, please enjoy this short audiovisual presentation.
Most enlightened businesses now believe that the business, of course, is still making profits, but also has to do with uplifting the lives of people. That is why in PHINMA, we have chosen to invest in businesses and in communities where our businesses have the ability to enable the communities to achieve the essentials of a dignified life. It's the whole idea of doing good while doing well.
Proud ako maging mag-aaral ng PHINMA kasi alam kong ihahanda nila kami para magkatrabaho agad at makatulong sa pamilya at bansa.
Ibang saya ko na mabigyan ng aking family ng safe home in a nice community. Dahil sa PHINMA, ang dating dream naging reality.
Alam ko sa PHINMA, matatag ang trabaho ko kasi kaya nilang harapin ang pagsubok. Alam kasi nila na maraming pamilya ang umaasa sa amin.
Basta't nagbakasyon kami, alam kong magiging relax ako kung sa microtel or trip kami ng pamilya. Enjoy ang bonding.
So one of the things that we've decided to do is empower the younger generations of PHINMA employees and officers to carry this mission and embrace it as their own, because there is so much more that remains to be done. But the other part of this is trying to engage the rest of the business community to become active partners in this effort. We cannot do this alone. This is a whole of society approach. Business really has to come together. And for this, PHINMA has been willing to be a leading voice in business for good, business for social good, business for uplifting the lives of our people. We really need to push on through our younger generations of future PHINMA leaders who will hopefully carry on the task with the same degree of passion and commitment. That's what I'm hoping PHINMA will be known for and PHINMA will be remembered for.
So good afternoon again to everyone. Thank you for taking some time to join us for this afternoon's briefing. I am Cara Albert from PHINMA Corporation, and I will be your moderator for today. So I'm pleased to introduce our speakers. We have Mr. E.J. Kwahansen, PHINMA Corp's Deputy CFO, who will start off by giving the financial updates for PHINMA Corporation. And following that, we also have Mr. Happy Tan, the Country Chief of PHINMA Education for the Philippines. Sir Happy will be sharing some insights on PHINMA Education. Then we'll be giving the floor back to EJ to touch a bit on our other key strategic business units and to wrap it up with the outlook for the group. So please note the following. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of the program. So you can send in your questions through the Q&A button, which should be at the bottom of your screen. And please also be advised that we will be recording this session. So without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to EJ.
Okay, thank you very much, Cara, and thank you again to everyone for joining us today. I see a lot of friendly names in the chat, and I'd like to wish on behalf of PHINMA a Merry Christmas to everyone in advance and prosperous New Year to everyone as well. Thank you as well to Happy for joining us today, and I'd also like to acknowledge a few of our other colleagues that are observing the call. From PHINMA Education, Trista Menardo, who's the Chief Strategy Officer. Of course, our Group CFO, Mr. Pith Brion, and our Treasurer for PHINMA Corp, Nanette Villalobos. So our Chairman, Ramon Del Rosario Jr., I think did a better job in the video of sharing what PHINMA Corporation is all about and how we make the portfolio decisions that we make. But just to summarize it, we really believe in doing good while doing well. The portfolio decisions that we make are in areas that we feel that the country has great need, where we can bring forth our competitive advantages, including our management expertise and our knowledge of the industries that we're in, so that we can really make a difference, so that we can really make an impact, and really focusing on areas where we think that maybe not enough focus is being placed, and uplifting the lives of those most in need within our country. And that's reflected in the 4 strategic business units that we're in, which we'll see in the next slide. So PHINMA Corporation, as I guess a refresher, is in 4 strategic business units. Education, we're happy will tell us a little bit more about their very exciting story. Construction materials, where PHINMA might be most well known historically. We have under our construction materials group Union Gable Steel Corporation, which provides steel products and steel solutions. And it's also the owner of PHINMA Solar, which is our rooftop solar business, and Phil Cement Corporation, which distributes cement nationwide. That's been the largest driver of PHINMA Corp's revenue over the past few years. In July of this year, we completed a consolidation which allowed us, PHINMA Corp, to acquire another 8% of PHINMA Education, but also the majority stakes in PHINMA Properties and PHINMA Hospitality, as well as PHINMA Microtel Hotels. So our property and hospitality businesses, both of which we'll tell you a little bit more about later, are really emerging businesses that we're developing. But overall, what we want to do is take our experience in these areas of need, replicate those models in developing property and hospitality businesses, while of course continuing to grow both our education and construction materials businesses. Next slide, please. So looking at our financials on a year-on-year basis for the first 9 months of the year, you see strong growth in PHINMA Education, and that largely drove the growth in core net income for PHINMA Corp. Revenue for PHINMA Education Holdings was almost 4 billion in the 9-month period, with net income approaching 1 billion pesos and net income attributable to the parent of 560 million. This is really on the back of record enrollment in PHINMA Education. Now, PHINMA Construction Materials, as I mentioned, is the largest driver of our revenue growth. It did have strong positive net income despite challenges in demand that it faced in the first 9 months. The third quarter saw a resumption of that demand as government spending and infrastructure continued to strengthen. And this is a trend that we expect to continue into the next years, as President Marcos has committed to strong infrastructure spending. So revenue of PHINMA Construction Materials was flat at about 10.1 billion for the 9-month period. Net income of 360, slightly down from last year, and net income attributable to the parent of 236 million pesos. Now, our emerging businesses, PHINMA Properties and Hospitality, saw strong growth as well. In PHINMA Properties, real estate revenues was 1.39 billion of the 9-month period, up 35% over the same period in 2022. Over the last few years, we've really seen stronger growth from our property business. Again, another trend that we continue to expect to see in coming years. And I'm really happy to say that on the hospitality side, both occupancy and ADR, as well as RevPAR, have increased across all locations. I think we can all see this with the various holidays over the last year. When we go out of town or when we go to hotels, they're really, really more and more full, or you can see pictures on social media that the airports are crowded. We've really seen stronger rebound in the hospitality business, and MICE activities have continued to come back as well. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for PHINMA Corporation? Over the 9-month period, we've seen a record in core net income. It's really peaked. So looking at our pandemic low of 83 million in 2020, this has really come up to 743 million pesos for the first 3 quarters of the year, a CAGR of 108% over that 3-year period, and up 62% from 2022. This is a trend that, again, we expect to continue. And I can tell you this because Happy is going to share with you the wonderful story of PHINMA Education. And that's a business that's continuing to grow. It's a business of vital need in the country. And it's really been driving PHINMA Corp's bottom line over the last few years. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Happy to share more about PHINMA Education. Sorry, one more slide. We do have a strong balance sheet. It's been healthy. Assets have grown of 10 billion pesos over the last year, and this is largely due to the One PHINMA consolidation in July. This has positioned us well to continue to grow, and we do intend to continue investing in our strategic business units to accelerate that growth. Okay. With that, I'll turn it over to Happy.
Thanks, EJ. Good afternoon. Next slide, please. PHINMA Education was established in 2004 with the purchase of Arroyo University in Cabanatuan in order to address the fundamental market failure in Philippine educational sector, which is there are very few schools that provide good quality education at very low price points. You can have a handful of really good schools, but are very exorbitant tuition fees. Or on the other hand, you can have you have mostly a lot of schools that would bring in students, but the quality is not good enough. And so based on that, we knew that this was, as our president, Mr. De Rosario said, an opportunity for social business to try to solve a complex social issue using the power of and the discipline of business. And we knew that if we were able to provide good quality at very low price points, that there will be a very successful business for PHINMA Corporation, but also a significant contribution to the human capital requirements of our country. And this has proven to be the case with our history. In the past 20 years, from about 5,700 students, we are now at 146,500 students. We are the largest network of schools, not just in the Philippines, but recently we understand that we are already the biggest one in Southeast Asia. And 2 points I think that's important to remember. Number one, growth was not driven mostly by acquisitions. Yes, we bought schools over the years, but if you actually break down this enrollment growth, you will see that it's the organic growth of the existing schools that we transformed, that we turned around, that is really contributing to the enrollment growth of the network. And so the second point we wanted to share is that growth, as we've learned from our history, follows quality. If we do not turn around the quality of the school, we will not be able to grow. And in order to expound on this a bit more, let's please go to the second slide. In the Philippines, it's important to signal to our markets that the quality of the school is improving. And it's usually in a more straightforward way done through the performance in board exams. When we buy the schools that we bought, they normally would be performing at about 15%, 20% board passing. And as we know in the Philippines, on average, the national passing rates are about 40, 50% passing. And so we targeted 80% for all of our schools. We need to make sure that the students who come to us who are already in a disadvantage because of the problems we've been having with our school system, we need to make sure that they are positioned for success when they graduate. And so we see here the board performances of our schools. We're particularly proud of what we've done for nursing and allied health and criminology. Although criminology is slightly low this year, but it has always been kind of closer to 90% in previous years. And what's important to realize here is that PHINMA Education does not have admissions exams, because we know if we have an admission exam, we'll end up admitting the students who can afford to have good quality basic education. And that is not the student that we want to serve. We want to embrace the students that other schools are saying, no, you're not eligible to come to our school because you didn't pass our entrance exams. But that's the majority of Filipino high school graduates. And if nobody develops a curriculum or a pedagogical approach to suit their needs, then we are not serving vast majority of Filipino students. So what's important to remember here is not just that some of these performance numbers are similar to some of the best schools in the country, but that the starting point when we bring in students to our system is that majority, 95%, sometimes more than 95% of our students are not ready for college. The sad reality in the Philippines is that we have graduates of grade 12 high school who have the proficiencies of a grade 6 student. That's your average grade 12 student. Those are the ones who are not being admitted into the majority of the schools in the country. And those are the ones who are systematically neglected. Those are the students we want to bring in. Those are the students we want to serve. And we turn them around and make them graduate and make them pass the board. And the success is not only with completion of a degree. If we go to the next slide, we will see the results of a study that we commissioned from economists working with, this is not an official PIDS study, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, but some of their leading economists have been working with us on this study because we knew that we had something valuable to contribute to our students, but we did not have the quantitative evidence to show that our claims are actually founded. And now we're proud to say that based on this study conducted by these economists, we can show that the average PHINMA education graduate has a higher salary on average, has a shorter waiting time for employment, and has a lower poverty risk compared not just to Filipino students in the same age cohort, but Filipino college graduates. So it's not just a story that they're better off because they were able to get a college degree from PHINMA Ed. Even if you compare them to the average college graduate in the Philippines, PHINMA education graduates are doing better. We still have a lot of work to do. We still need to improve our, as you can see from the previous slide, our graduation and board passing rates. We still need to make sure that more of our students complete their education. But this is very promising for us that we now have external validation for some of the interventions that we've been introducing to the lives of our students. Last slide, please. And what we're also trying to convey to our stakeholders and also to the investors that are interested in this field is that it is possible to serve the needs of the underserved and still have strong financial performance. As you can see here, all of the schools in the country suffered significantly during the pandemic years. We were lucky that our loss of employment was significantly lower compared to other schools. But more importantly, in the subsequent years, we were able to turn things around and really increase our enrollment and our retention, especially compared to what we were projecting, given what the challenges of the pandemic was supposed to be. And so now we are at, as EJ said, about 4 billion pesos in revenue. And the net income is almost 1 billion. But if you just account for the amounts that are attributable to our parent company, it's about 560 million pesos. We just want to emphasize here that, because we are serving a low income market, this is not due to, exorbitant prices. In order to succeed in a low income market, what you need to do is have very efficient operations, because we need to be able to have low tuition to be able to make it affordable to the students that we want to serve. But in order to make these kinds of numbers, you have to have good volume. And so we have a kind of low margin, high volume model. But I think what's important to remember is that there is margin. This is not charity. This is not a philanthropic enterprise. What you need to have to do is to really figure out how to have very lean, very efficient operations, and at the same time, very effective interventions so that students who are disadvantaged can actually perform as well as those who were given more opportunities in their childhood. I'll pause here and then pass it on to EJ. Thank you. I think we'll have questions later.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Happy, and I'm sure a lot of questions will be directed your way. PHINMA Education is a very exciting story, and there were a couple of things that Happy talked about that really resonated with me, and also is reflected in the way we look at our other businesses as well. First of all, in PHINMA Education, there was a fundamental need that we identified. The fundamental need for the country to continue to grow was a need for good education. The second part is, if you listen to Happy and anyone in PHINMA Education, there's really so much passion and there's so much learning into what the market is, what kind of market they're serving, and what that market needs. And then thirdly, once that happens, finding and developing the right kind of product, the right kind of curriculum for that market. Now, if we look at construction materials, there's a fundamental need, right? The Philippines is fundamentally behind in our infrastructure spending, and that can really drive economic growth in coming years. So the next few slides, I'll go over some of the need fundamentally. If you look here, it shows the infrastructure flagship projects of the government. There's almost 200 of them with an indicative total project cost of about 9 trillion pesos, and this will happen from this year on to beyond 2028. And there's really that strong need, and this is just data from NEDA. If we go on to the next slide, it shows it further, right? So the fundamental need is there. There's a lot of projects. You know, you look at our roads, they're in need of improvement, our airports, our seaports, our bridges, the way we can connect to really deal with being in an archipelago. Secondly, knowing the markets. So PHINMA through Union Galvez Steel Corporation really has what we consider a very extensive nationwide distribution network. It goes from as far north as Ilocos to as far south as Davao. With our steel products business being so nationwide, we got to know our dealers. We got to know the needs of the local economies in terms of their construction materials requirements. And in 2019, knowing their needs, knowing that there was a shortage of high quality cement, and knowing that PHINMA's history was in developing and building the cement industry in the Philippines, it was a natural desire of ours and a natural move to really go back into the cement business. And we did that through developing a cement processing facility in Mariveles, Bataan, which we inaugurated in 2020. And that was through Phil Cement Corporation. So starting with that model of UGC, knowing the local markets and developing a product, we went back into the cement business through high quality cement. And I'll show you in succeeding slides a little bit more about that. But also we continue to innovate within that space. Union Galvez Steel Corporation has now expanded our product lines. We now do insulated panels, which is a way that we can continue to support the food requirements of the Philippines, the food security requirements, because these are panels that are needed for cold storage, which will avoid wastage of the food that's already so hard for our country to develop. We're now into light steel frames. And also recently, we've gotten into the rooftop solar business because that has a natural synergy with Union Galvez Steel, where we install the roofs, and now we can put in renewable energy on top of the roofs, especially in areas where they might not have as much access to the grid or power supply is intermittent or expensive. Next slide, please. So talking about the products, on your upper left-hand side, you can see the Union Cement brand. We do have very strong strength. Our capacity nationwide is around 2 million tons of cement per year. And this is using the distribution network that I mentioned earlier. But also when we re-entered the cement business, because of our brand cachet there, a lot of the cement dealers were very happy to sign back up with us, and they continue to sell our brand of cement again. You know, in fact, when we were at the inauguration in Mariveles, a lot of our former dealers were the ones giving the speeches and saying, "Hey, thank you for coming back." Now, on the lower left-hand side, you can see some of the products of UGC. We're now looking at stone-coated roofing. These are ways that we can have safer, more reliable roofs so that our countrymen, when there are things like typhoons, they can feel more secure knowing they have high-quality roofing, that they don't see as much leakage. I have a friend recently that installed a new roof. He had a 20-year-old house, and for the last 10 years, it's been leaking consistently. He wasn't using UGC at the time. Now he raves to me about once a month whenever it rains that he's so happy with it, and he's been referring a lot of his friends to get UGC products as well. But in addition, of course, to servicing the residential market, all of these major infrastructure projects that you see on the right-hand side, such as the North-South Commuter Rail, will need the different construction materials products that we have on offer. So that's really developing the products similar to PHINMA education that match the market, that fit the requirements, even in cement, which, you know, it seems like it's a commodity that's fairly fungible. There are actually very unique types of cement depending on what the needs of the customers are. And we can do that through PhilCement. Next slide, please. So the result of that, yes, over the last few years, we've seen a reduction in net income attributable to PHINMA Corp. But our revenue growth is continuing. For the most part, it's flat year on year. What we've really been doing, though, is developing these markets further. And again, to go back to something that Happy said, growth follows quality. And so we think that as we continue to develop these markets, we develop these relationships with our dealers and our customers nationwide, and we continue to innovate in our solutions, that growth will follow. And so as we see a recovery in construction demand coming from the pandemic, we think that we're well positioned to benefit from that growth. Next slide, please. So moving on to PHINMA Properties. Properties is a business that we've been in for quite some time, but it's another area where there's a fundamental need. You see on the next slide that we have a significant backlog in the country, right? We think it might be as many as 11 million units by the end of President Marcos's term. And I think that's why he launched the 4PH program, which aims to produce 1 million housing units per year. Again, this is a business that we've been in for some time. You can see on the next slide that PHINMA Properties has won many awards. And I'm happy to note that the awards that we've won have been across different income levels. And what do I mean by that? Going back to our history when we were very focused on socialized housing, that product line was able to win awards, but now we've won awards for and been recognized for our properties that are targeted towards the mid and high income segments as well in both 2022 and 2023. The reason I bring that up is in the next slide. I'm very happy to share with everyone that we're expanding the portfolio to really go back into these low-cost housing projects. We have one project in Cebu City, Aspire, and another one in Bacoor, and we really aim to put together more affordable units. Again, similar to what we did in education, similar to what we did in construction materials. These are markets that we know because these are the markets of our students. These are the markets of some of our stakeholders. And we want to provide solutions that will allow them to have safe homes so they can feel that security, so they can take pride in where they live. And if I can quote Pete Felix, who's the CEO of PHINMA Properties, he wants people to have pride. He wants to have good communities of decent people that can also be a force for good and a force for change, because we have 24 million households in this country. And it's prime for this kind of a business. Next slide, please. So moving forward for the rest of the year and longer term, we aim to continue to expand these different businesses. In education, as Happy mentioned, we expect more organic growth. Of course, we're looking at other potential acquisitions as long as they fit within our model. In construction materials, we're expanding PhilCement through a new terminal in Davao. And we're building a state-of-the-art insulated panels factory that has a very high capacity in Pampanga. In the property space, we're returning to affordable housing, and we're building up our project bank. In addition to going into the township space, because again, that's an area where we think we can see more synergies within the group. In hospitality, we're looking at developing more hotels in different locations, especially as domestic and foreign tourism are both recovering. So what we see on the whole is that PHINMA's on a growth trajectory. We're very confident in the portfolio decisions that we made and that we continue to make. And we'll continue to look for businesses that also fit that, I guess, that mission of ours of making lives better. So with that, I think we'll go to Q&A and open the floor for questions.
Thank you, EJ, for giving us that extensive overview of the business units and how these translate into the growth trajectory for PHINMA Corp while also serving the needs of the country. And thank you also to Sir Happy for giving us that deeper dive into PHINMA education and how this, I guess, transforms schools and the lives of the students even beyond graduation. So like EJ said, we're now opening the floor to questions from our audience. If you have any, please feel free to use the Q&A box to send in your questions. But before we move on to the live questions, we can start off with a few that we received prior to the briefing. So, Sir Happy, we'll go to you first. So this year, I think households were a bit or even quite challenged with the high inflation levels that we saw. Could you share a bit on how PHINMA Education has managed to improve its student retention while also keeping the margins and staying competitive in the education sector?
Sure, thank you. I think the secret of PHINMA Ed has always been our understanding of the needs of the low-income segment, and also the attitude that our understanding is never complete, that our understanding of their needs need to evolve as their needs evolve. And so we anticipated at the start of the pandemic that not only will there be a significant disruption in their purchasing capacity, but we knew that it will take much longer for low-income households to try to recover from that kind of disruption or setback. And even several years after the pandemic, it's not the case that, okay, we can go back to the previous fees and tuition schedules that we wanted to charge or other schools would want to charge. So we were very clear that we needed to try to find a way to not just recover, to actually opposite of recovering some of the lost opportunity during the pandemic, but to actually reduce our cost. We wanted to, and in order to do that, we needed to have two things in place. Number one, a clearer understanding of the reduction in purchasing capacity of our students. Number two, we needed to make sure that our operations are much, much more efficient so that we have lower costs and therefore we have an ability to reduce our fees. And so we kind of figured out that roughly our students who are, come from households that earn between 15 to 25,000 pesos per month. This is not technically below the poverty line. Poverty line is about 9,000 pesos. But these are very financially vulnerable households. These are families where if there's some unexpected medical emergency, they will have to confront that horrible question of who among their kids will continue studying and who will stop. These are the kids that households that we want to serve. And we anticipated that roughly about 10,000 pesos is probably the ceiling with which they have in order to pursue their education. And so we use that. We challenged our schools and say, how can we reduce our costs so that we can peg our prices to 10,000 pesos for tuition and miscellaneous? There are some other expenses that we, like uniforms and books that we have to account for, but at least the things we can control, how can we keep it down and how can we reduce it? So that has always been a very strong culture and attitude in FINMA Ed. Also, we knew that with distance learning, the other challenge is completion. Whether you're rich or poor, whether you're doing digital or analog, if you are away from the teacher, you are more likely to be distracted and therefore more likely to stop studying. And so we had to make sure we figure out how to keep our students engaged. It's not just a question of money. There will always be a question of money, but it's much more complex than that. We need to also understand how you can keep students who are behind the screen, far away from campus. How do you keep them engaged? And so we've come up with several interventions ranging from the data package that we cut with the two big telcos in the country so that they can have constant communication with their teachers and their peers, all the way to our standard activities of identifying the students who are at risk of dropping out and reaching out to them and to their parents and visiting their homes 3 times a semester if necessary. So these are the things that other schools don't pay attention to because they don't serve these kinds of students. But this is something that we feel is critical to our model. And in terms of your last point on competitiveness, we knew that very few schools care about this segment of the population. And this is a large segment of Philippine population. And so we knew that if we were able to serve them well, we will be able to have a sustainable business. So I'll pause there and see if you have follow-up questions.
Thank you, Sir Happy. Really shows that I guess FINMA Ed really puts the students at the center of its business model. Now I have another question this time for EJ. The construction materials group has also been in a challenging environment. Interest rates were relatively high this year. The residential market saw a slowdown, and I believe even government spending sort of slowed down in the first half of the year. Given that, could you give us maybe a 6 to 12 month outlook for UGC?
Sure, Kara. But maybe instead of focusing only on UGC, I can talk about the larger construction materials group. As you mentioned, I guess it is a challenging macroeconomic environment for construction. But I think the secret, and again, similar to FINMA Education, you have to put the customer at the heart of what you do. And eventually, and hopefully next year, the markets recover, construction spending will also recover. And in order to be primed for construction spending to recover, I think there's really two things that we've had to do. One is continue to stay close to our customers, continue to meet their demand with the highest quality that we can. That's something that we don't want to compromise. It's, I think, tempting in a competitive environment to maybe bring in lower cost items so that you can continue to maintain margins. But what we want to do is provide high quality products that will stand the test of time, that our customers can find reliable, that they can feel safe with our products, that they feel that they can construct good quality things that they can also sell on to their customers. So that's one. We do this nationwide. We meet regularly with our customers in the regions where we're in. I think at this point we have more than 20 different sales offices that we reach. Even I think tomorrow there's a client dinner in Davao, for example, because we're having a Christmas party there for the construction materials group. So these are the different ways we have touch points with the customers. Our sales teams reach out to them. And knowing these customers also allows us to find out their pain points. For example, in this competitive environment that you're mentioning, it's also important to make sure that the customers we get are customers that will pay. And we've been very happy with the level of receivables that we have and the quality of those receivables that we have. But sometimes we do have to, for certain customers, extend out payment terms. And that's something where there's a bit of a discussion on, okay, how can we better serve this customer? Is it through extending credit terms? Is this through offering them different kinds of products? Is this through discounts? And those are discussions that our teams have on a regular basis. Second, to knowing the customer is also, and keeping the customer, is again finding the right kind of products that will support our customers' growth. And that's something we're doing now. For example, as I mentioned earlier, we're developing a new factory for insulated panels, and it might be counterintuitive that in a competitive market, we're putting in this capex to develop something that has, I think, 1 million square meters of capacity per year. But it's something that we feel will be there for when the market recovers. And again, this helps us address the food security needs of the country. So we're already investing in that ahead of the recovery so that when the recovery happens, we're ready.
Thanks, EJ, for sharing also how CMG, I guess, stays really close to the customer to be able to meet out their needs and work out how we can fit what they're looking for. Sir Happy, if I may go back to you. So education has, if I may say, really a track record of success. So looking ahead, are there plans to acquire more schools or to focus on organic growth?
Sure. Well, there are fairly ambitious plans for continued expansion, both in the Philippines and Indonesia, and in countries in Southeast Asia as well. And it will always be a combination of acquisition and for the existing schools, expanding their campuses, even with just buying vacant property. But I think, so for example, we think that we need to have stronger presence in Visayas and in Mindanao. And when you look at the list of cities and provinces which have the largest number of grade 12 graduates and the largest number of the college population, there are those areas that we are prioritizing. We are open to acquiring new schools, existing schools that will be new members of our portfolio, but we're also open, given the regulatory setup, to buying greenfields. Because what's important for us right now is accessibility for the students. We don't necessarily buy the best run schools. What's important for us really is where the campus is located and whether it is easy access for low-income students. The kind of rule of thumb that we have is it one jeepney ride from where most of our students will be living? So that's really critical for us. And then second, given some of the regulatory constraints, whether the permits are there or not, because it's easier for us to expand and offer the right programs if they already have the permits in place. So those are some of the key considerations. But what's really important to understand is that our principle or philosophy for acquiring is that we don't look for crown jewels and then add them to the PHINMA collection. We look for these schools that are in the right location, and we bring in our systems. We bring in our teaching philosophy. We bring in our management practices and turn it around. And I think that's what we've seen in our history, from a 5,000 population school in Cabanatuan, which is now close to about 25,000 students. And we want to grow that even larger. So acquisition and organic growth are really two pieces of the same effort in our operations.
Thanks, Sir Happy. So we have another question here for EJ. Would you be okay to talk a little bit more about the current competitive landscape in the Philippine cement sector? So I guess what has CMG's strategies been to grow or defend its market share?
Yeah, sure, Kara. Really, when you look at the cement industry now, and of course the larger economy, demand has been lower this year, which really caused an oversupply of cement and really strengthened or heightened competition in the industry. So what we did in response is strategically promoting our locally produced blended cement, which we call Type 1 tier extra strength for the broader market, and at the same time emphasizing how strong our Type 1 cement is for large scale projects. So it's looking at, I guess, bifurcating the market. Type 1 cement is there for those large scale infrastructure projects, and we have the Type 1P for the broader market. Making sure again that we have the right product mix for the customers that we have. The other part of it is not just competing on price, but competing in terms of distribution and in terms of being close to the market. So we've expanded our warehouses so that we can reduce again the distribution cost, thereby increasing our margins. And again, just continuing to develop and deepen our relationship with the dealers that we have. That's pretty much how we've expanded our market share this year.
Thanks, EJ. We have a few more questions coming in. Sir Happy, if I may direct this question back to you. We have a question on whether there are plans for PHINMA Education to do an IPO. Is that something you could share?
Sure, I'll defer to our Chief Strategy Officer, who's in charge of our capitalization strategy. Trisa's here. I don't mean to be coy, but she's better at the details of this. Go ahead, Tris.
Okay. Thanks, Happy. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, as Happy mentioned earlier, there are plans for the education group to continue to grow, whether it's in our current locations now or in new locations. And so we are in the process of raising additional capital to support these expansion activities. An IPO is, and that's how we look at the IPO. It's more a vehicle for us to raise the funding that we need to support our growth. At this point, we are looking at different opportunities. The market conditions aren't ideal yet for an IPO for us, but we're not close to possibly listing in the future, but nothing maybe in the more shorter term in terms of an IPO. But definitely, PHINMA Education is continuing to raise the capital it needs for expansion.
Thank you, Trisa. For the next question, EJ, if I may direct this one to you. I guess it's referring on the PHINMA Corp level. What would be our CapEx or I guess investment programs for the year ahead, or are there any capital raising plans with respect to the planned investments or CapEx?
Can I just say ditto to Trisa's answer? No. I think as we presented, there's quite a lot of CapEx going on group-wide. And while I was being a little facetious about saying ditto to Trisa's answer, depending on, or not depending, but at the level of each strategic business unit, we have to evaluate the capital raising plan with what the expenditures are and look at the different factors in terms of where we see interest rates going, how we see the equity markets playing, and finding the right solutions. Now, on a larger level, yes, we expect interest rates to come down next year, which might make the hurdle rates at least lower in terms of when we can get a return on our capital. But in terms of how we allocate that CapEx across the business units, I can say that all 4 business units are looking at CapEx. I won't say which one intends on having the most because these are projects that we still have to review and evaluate. And if there are investments on the part of PHINMA Corp, we will disclose them at the right time. But I think just again, to take a step back, these are investments or CapEx that will make, if it makes sense to PHINMA Corp and the group, and it ties into our longer term vision and our longer term strategy.
Thanks, EJ. So I'm sorry to cut this Q&A session short, but we are reaching our 1 hour limit for this afternoon session. If you have any other questions you'd like to raise, feel free to send an email to us. We'll be flashing the email address of our investor relations in a while. I'd like to just check with any of our panelists if you have any last notes that you'd like to give our attendees or parting words.
Trista,
Okay.
happy?
No, EJ, go ahead.
Okay, well, again, thank you to our friends from PHINMA Education for joining, and thank you, everyone. Yeah, again, we think the prospects are rosy. And if at any time you'd like to have a deeper dive, feel free to reach out to Investor Relations team, and we can set something up. So thank you once again, and happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you everyone for joining us for this afternoon's analyst briefing. Thank you to EJ, Sir Happy, Teresa for jumping in. Again, happy holidays to everyone who's joining from here, from the PHINMA group, and we hope to see you again in our next briefing in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.